It's time to take back your home from clutter. IKEA has affordable storage solutions to help you get organized and fit more of the things you love into the space you've got. A gym in your garage? Get pumped. A well-organized kitchen? It's sous vide time. A new wardrobe for your bedroom? Tray chic. How about storage for kids' toys? Visit your local IKEA store or ikea-usa.com/storage today so you can reclaim, reset, and relax at home.
Welcome back to a special edition of Tennis Unfiltered. It falls outside of our weekly schedule because we've got the Australian Open draw in front of us, and there is nothing we like more than going line by line through a draw. I've got George Belshaw, the tennis writer, and our resident tennis coach Calvin Betton here with me. I'm James Gray of inews.co.uk and the iNewspaper, and this is Tennis Unfiltered. Right, we're going to start with the British players because Todd Woodbridge was presenting the draw yesterday, and he said there was an audible gasp from the British journalists on more than one occasion, which is true because, as I wrote on Twitter, this was an absolute car crash for the British players. We obviously have three very good unseeded players, and there is a 25% chance that you draw a seeded player if you are unseeded. Unfortunately, all three of the male unseeded players drew a seed. We start with the big one, Jack Draper, playing Rafael Nadal, the top seed and defending champion, in the first round. Jack Draper is making his debut at the Australian Open. He made his debut at Wimbledon in 2021 by playing Novak Djokovic in round one, and now he's got Rafa Nadal at his first Australian Open. I dread to think what happens when he goes to Roland Garros for the first time in a couple of months. Calvin, I said to someone yesterday that Jack will have seen this draw and actually quietly fist pumped. He'll fancy his chances, won't he?
I think he'll win.
Really?
The way that Nadal started the season and the way that Jack started the season, the only sort of caution I'd put on it is that Jack's still in the tournament this week, and historically the people who go deep the week before a slam tend not to be at their best in the slam. But Nadal's looked nothing like in the matches he played at United Cup. I will caveat it with saying that last year, before the Aussie Open, he lost to Andy Murray in a exhibition match in, I think, maybe Dubai or somewhere, and looked terrible in that as well, and then he ended up winning the Aussie Open.
Yeah.
But I genuinely, I think I'll be picking Jack in my fantasy tennis as an outside.
Hashtag unfiltered fantasy tennis, which is the hashtag if you want to join in on social media and let us know how you picked your team and what you've gone for. If you want to join in with fantasy tennis, it's on our Twitter, Unfiltered Tennis, and you can get involved. You've got until 10 p.m. on Sunday night UK time to get involved, because obviously the tournament kicks off about an hour after that. George, do you share Calvin's optimism about Jack Draper taking on Rafa Nadal?
I share his optimism that he couldn't be playing Rafa at a much better time. The one thing I would say is that, and this is always a bit of a funny, disputable stat in some way, but Nadal's got a remarkably good record against left-handers. And the reason some will say he's got such a good record against left-handers is because he's never had to play himself. But even so, it's a very, very good record. He isn't often troubled by them, and I think a lot of lefties cause righties trouble from that very dynamic of being a lefty. Now, I don't put Jack in that category because Jack's a very good, talented player, but it will be an interesting dynamic that sometimes when you're a lefty playing a lefty, it can be a tougher match for you as a lefty if you're not used to it. And Nadal is very experienced in those sort of matches, and I'm not sure where Jack's experience sits on that sort of things or at this level. But look, we've just seen Nadal lose to de Minaur and Norrie. I think it's the first time he's lost from a set-up twice in a row in his career, something like that. He's had a lot of bad matches towards the end of last year. The one thing you'd say is he will have been pleased to get those kind of longer hours on court, I think. That was probably the best thing he's had from his Australian Open preparation. But we're in this territory again where we're questioning Nadal. But last year we did, and it didn't seem like he was coming into this tournament in great shape, and he went on to win it. So, I'll believe it when I see it. These guys are so good at getting ready for the slams themselves that I'm still just about backing Rafa, but I won't be picking either of them in my fantasy tennis.
I think what concerns me as well is it's not just last week. Like, when was the last time that Rafa played a match where you thought, "I'll tell you what, Rafa looked good today"? Like, it's been a long while.
Well,
it's been like, even in the French, which he won, didn't look great.
Yeah, he's lost 6 of his last 7 matches, which I can't think. I'm fairly sure has never happened in his professional career. I mean, a quick skate through, maybe when he was younger, like 20 years ago, but even then he was picking up slightly more wins than that. I'm looking back at when he lost to Alan Mackin. Calvin, do you know Alan Mackin?
I do, yeah. Yeah, he's from Scotland.
He beat Nadal in 2002.
Yeah, I think Alan was about 21 and Rafa was about 13, I think, or something like that, wasn't it?
I'd quite like to talk to him about that. That'd be quite funny. Anyway, got distracted. Sorry, I have 1 or 2 stats just to throw in here, which is Rafa's record against left-handers. His career record against all people is 11-48 and 2-4-3, which is a winning ratio of about 4.7. And his record against left-handers, he's only lost 18 matches, so that's 124 wins and 18 losses, and that's a ratio of 6.8. So he's got an elevated record against left-handers by quite a significant margin. And the last left-hander to beat him, though, was Cam Norrie.
Yeah, I still think that we can't largely see that as being quite irrelevant, because it's not the Nadal of the last 20 years. Yeah, last 15 years. It's a completely different Nadal that we've got. But also, there's been no left-handers like Jack. Jack hits the ball huge. He moves great. He's got a huge serve. He's solid mentally. He'll believe he can win, which is a key thing against Nadal. If Nadal was going up against somebody like, I don't know, say he was going up, he couldn't do because of the seedings, but say he was going up against somebody like Tsitsipas, I'd give Tsitsipas less chance than I'd give Jack of beating him, just because there's too much scar tissue with Tsitsipas or any of the younger guys. Whereas Jack's got this phenomenal belief, and physically he's huge. He's absolutely huge. So Rafa's best shot, which is whipping it up cross court, is just going to land right into Jack's wheelhouse. I don't think he'll batter him, but I think he'll beat him.
The thing I always say about Rafa is it's so hard playing him for the first time. The mental kind of... Taylor Fritz said a good thing in the Netflix documentary where he said, this is the biggest match of my life, and for Rafa it's just another match. And that is always true when you're playing one of the big 3, basically, or big 4, I suppose. But as you say, Calvin, Jack does have a phenomenal self-belief that does change that dynamic a little bit. There's also a little bit of news from Jack's camp. He's got a new fitness coach. A story that I broke, I suppose, this morning, is that he's working with... Thank you very much. I mean, it's been all over his Instagram. No one's noticed. Anyway, he's working with a guy called Dejan Vojnovic. Now, what's really interesting about him... there's lots of interesting things. He used to work with Laura Robson back in the day. He's also worked with Dinara Safina, Dominika Kibelkova, and more recently, Brandon Nakashima and Marin Cilic. Dejan Vojnovic is a double Olympian. I don't mean he's been at the Olympics twice. I mean he's been at the Summer and the Winter Olympics. He ran the 100 metres at the Sydney 2000 Olympics, and he did the 4-man bobsleigh at the 2006 Turin Winter Olympics, which I just love. I mean, I respect anyone who's got that kind of commitment. He also did long jump. He was national champion in long jump in Croatia.
So he can join the list of athletes we were talking about last week of good cross-discipline
and actually I had a listener came up to me at the Australian Open. He's also the Times' tennis correspondent, so there's more reason for him to be. It's quite a lot of reason for him to be there. And he said one person he thought of when we were talking about that last week is Mardy Fish, who, funnily enough, we were talking about, but not in that context. Mardy Fish apparently is a very good golfer and did play a tour event. He got a wild card in, but wasn't far away from making the cut, I believe. So he is
very good.
Yeah, he's a very serious golfer.
The other thing I was just going to throw into the mix that would make me a little worried about Draper and backing him is he's in danger of falling into the classic Australian Open, another Grand Slam trap of doing well at the tournament right on the eve of the event. So I think he's in the semi-finals in Adelaide right now.
Just said that,
And
Josh.
you know,
Yeah, Calvin did say this.
Did you?
Yeah, he made this point very,
Oh, sorry, I'm
very
half asleep.
astutely. Yes, he is.
I apologise.
He is in the semi-final, but by the time you listen to this, he will probably be in the final because he's playing Sunwoo Kwon, who he absolutely gubbed in Adelaide the week before. And then I can't exactly remember. I think Kokonakis is still in Adelaide, so I think he'll probably play him in the final. But I wanted to bring up the fitness trainer because
We had Evo last year, didn't we?
yeah, he actually won a title. The other semi-final, by the way, is Kokonakis Bautista Agut. The reason I brought out a fitness trainer is because of exactly that. He's going to come in he's been quite ill. Everyone at the Battle of the Brits got ill. Apparently, Joe Salisbury got everyone ill. That's the story going round, and that's the second time in 3 months that Jack's been really quite ill. And I think that has maybe taken a little bit out of him, albeit, his form in Adelaide suggests that he's working his way through it. But yeah, he's probably going to arrive in Melbourne on Saturday or Sunday. It's not been confirmed yet, but I'm guessing Rafa's going to be on Monday because Djokovic has got a hamstring concern, and I think they'll give him a Tuesday start, which means that Nadal will have to be a Monday. And that obviously is not going to suit Jack at all. Heck, he might come in and, as Calvin says, he might well beat him, but it's another little frisson to what is a fascinating matchup.
Do you tank that match today if you're?
Oh, I would have tanked yesterday.
Or do you kind of go?
I literally said he was because he was served for the match against Hatchinoff and got broken, or maybe he served at 4-2 and got broken, and he was furious. It was quite funny. He went to his towel, and Trotz, his coach, was sat right next to the towel box, and Draper just screamed the F word. Like, I've not really ever seen him get quite that angry on court, and Trotz just sort of nodded quietly and smiled at him. It's quite funny. But yes, I said when he broke back, Hatchinoff broke back, I said to whoever I was sat next to, he should tank this. Like, 100% tank it. But of course he didn't, because he's a pro and he's chopping people up for fun.
It's also, you got to remember as well, it's a 250 title, and they're seeding for such as Indian Wells and Miami and that kind of thing. I don't think it's in the mentality of certain players, and I'd put Jack in that to tank ever. I just don't think it enters the mind.
Yeah, and it would be a first ATP title, which, is a big deal. Anyway, let's move on, because as I say, it was a car crash for all the Brits, pretty much, barring maybe Emma Raducanu, but even that wasn't very good. We'll come on to her later. Kyle Edmund is up against Yannick Sinner. So, welcome back to the Australian Open 3 years later, Kyle, but I think that might be the end of that. Incidentally, for people who follow me on Instagram, they'll already know this. I went and watched Yannick Sinner practice the other day, and I was stood right at the edge of the baseline, and he was just doing forehands out the forehand corner, so he was about 3 feet away from me. Bloody hell does he hit it hard. Like, I don't think I've ever seen someone just, like, objectively hit a tennis ball so hard. It was horrendous. Anyway, Kyle Edmund's got to deal with that, so I don't think that's going to go brilliantly well. Andy Murray has also got a seed. He's got Matteo Berrettini. Calvin, Murray's been going on for a while, a good 18 months, about how he's desperate to get his ranking up so that he can play his way into Grand Slams a bit more. I mean, it's a shocker, isn't it?
He kind of is, but also he was fuming. When did he play? Was it at
US Open? It was his last Grand Slam match. Yeah.
He was fuming that he didn't beat him at the US Open. Yeah. I think he thinks he's got his number.
He should have beat him.
Yeah. Now, whether he has got his number is a different matter. I mean, let's be straight as well. This is not the Berrettini of 18 months ago, of Wimbledon 2021.
Yeah.
He's still playing to a decent level, but it's not that version. But I think Murray thinks he's got his number. Now, whether he can transfer that into it, playing the way that we know Andy's going to come out and play, I don't know. But I don't think he'll think it's a terrible draw.
It's also worth noting that Berrettini ended his season early last year with a foot problem. He pulled out of Davis Cup finals, and obviously he did play United Cup and got to the final with Italy. But, it's just another frisson, something else that Murray might try and latch on to. He's had a reasonably good week, actually. He beat Zhang Zhizhen and Alex de Minaur at the Couillon Classic, which is an exhibition, but I always say an exhibition 4 days before a slam has a little bit more to it, because Murray's not there to hit front-facing tweeners and piss around. He's there to get some serious match practice in, and similarly, even Lendl said as much. He said, nothing beats competitive practice, but this is as good as it gets.
I once backed Marin Cilic to do really well at Wimbledon, having watched him hammer Nadal at, I think it was Hurlingham a few years ago, and then he went out the second round, and I was like, for God's sake. But that now, like, supposed to be Cilic, just had a quick chat afterwards. I was like, oh God, Marin, you played really well today. You look really good. He's like, yeah, I feel amazing. I'm like really, really ready. I'm peaking at the right time.
I mean, that sounds like, yeah.
Okay. So,
incidentally, you reminded me that
one
bit of news that would happen between this and the last podcast. Marin Cilic is out of the Australian Open. He's got a knee injury and he's pulled out, which is great news for Botic van der Zandschulp because it meant he went from unseeded to seeded. But there you go. You want to say something?
Probably, I wouldn't describe it as the only piece of tennis news between then and now.
That's true, yes. Congratulations to Naomi Osaka, who has announced that she is pregnant, which is why that she pulled out of the Australian Open, and rendering a couple of think pieces about her quietly quitting slightly irrelevant. But it's been the talk of the press room, I can tell you that much. Let's move on to the other Brits in the draw, because there are 5 of them in the men's draw. First time since 1988 that we've had 5 men in the Australian Open main draw. Dan Evans has got Facundo Bagnis, with potentially Daniel Galan or Jeremy Chardy waiting in the next round. Cam Norrie has got the wildcard Luca Van Asch, who's got the reciprocal French wildcard. And I think he's got Montero or Les Gen in the second round. Go on.
Van Asch for a time was quite highly rated. Maybe Calvin will be able to tell us a little bit more about him, but there certainly was a period where he was really bigged up as quite a very talented young player and someone. So I'll be quite interested to see how he looks against Cam, but maybe Calvin can tell us a bit more about Van Asch.
Yeah, he won the French Open boys title in 2021. He beat Arthur Fils in the final. I don't know if he's someone you've seen around the circuit, Calvin, Luca Van Asch. I mean, he's still 18 and still fairly young, but he's obviously up against Norrie in the first round.
I don't know much about him, no. If Arthur Fils would have beat him in the final, then I would have known a lot about Arthur Fils because he's playing in Portugal, where I am this week. But,
I see. Okay.
Unfortunately, it didn't, so I can't offer much on Luca Van Asch, I'm afraid.
Well, thank God we went through all that, getting you off mute and getting your mic in the right place for that insight. That's huge. What an absolute startling podcast this is. It's going really well. And Dan Evans, Facundo Bagnis, I think we probably all expect Evo to beat Bagnis in the first round there. I'll speak to Dan Evans a bit later on today and we'll see exactly what kind of shape he is in. But he's got Andrei Rublev slated in the third round, which I think is going to be a pretty tough matchup for him, George.
Should we do our 5... reach second round or not for the men? Quick yes or no. So Draper Nadal. So Calvin's going Draper.
Who are you going, George?
I'm gonna lean Nadal because I'm a cautious optimist for Draper, but like to cover my own back and not get teased on social media for saying Nadal's gonna lose.
I'm also going to lean Nadal. Murray versus Berrettini. Calvin, one word.
I think Berrettini beats him again.
George?
Murray. I'm going Murray. I don't know why. I'm always wrong with him, but yeah, I think he should beat him in some ways.
Is anyone picking Carl Edmund to beat Yannick Sinner?
No.
What did you pick for Murray Berrettini?
Oh, good point. Yeah, I'm picking Berrettini. Sorry. I'm not picking Murray against Berrettini. Georgie, you haven't given an indication on Edmund.
Sinner, definitely.
Yeah, I think we're probably all in agreement there. Like it's no slight on Kyle. Yannick Sinner's a top player, and Kyle Edmund hasn't played an Australian Open in 3 years. It's just facts. Evans, Bagnis, Calvin.
I think Evo will win that, but I don't think it'd be Evo matches are never straightforward, are they? Like just the way he plays and that. And Bagnis is no mug, but yeah. I think he'll have too much for him.
George,
although he had a bad result last week today, getting up against Mackenzie McDonald, wasn't it?
The only thing that makes me go against Evo is every time it looks like he has a really nice draw at a slam, he then seems to lose first round. So, but I am going to go Evo, in spite of that.
And Cam Norrie against Luca Van Asch, George. Just as you take a really big sip of a drink. Norrie, yeah, very good, yeah.
Norrie, but I'm intrigued to see Van Asch and see what hype's about.
Calvin, same answer?
Yeah, Noz will win that, I think.
Yeah. Good, so how many have we got going through then? I think the majority say we've got Evans and Norrie. It's not a great start for the Brits, is it? Let's move on to the Brits in the women's draw, of which there are only two. Harriet Dart and, of course, Emma Raducanu, who I watched practice on Thursday, and it was the best I've seen her practice all week. She was much higher energy, skipping around much more, looked pretty comfortable with the ankle, albeit with one or two tentative moments, as you might expect. But yes, I've no doubt she's going to play. For people who are worried that she might pull out, I would say I'm 85% sure at this stage that she's going to play in the first round, where she faces Tamara Korpatch. Can anyone tell me the most interesting thing about Tamara Korpatch? No, well done, everyone. As some eagle-eyed or eagle-eared listeners will remember, that she played doubles with Harmony Tan at Wimbledon last year. Well, actually, she didn't, because Harmony Tan pulled out an hour before the match, but then miraculously recovered from the injury to play Serena Williams on centre court. And Tamara Korpatch went mental on Instagram, and it was incredibly tasty tea. Which was spilt everywhere. She won her first WTA title in September. She won the WTA 125 in Budapest. She's never won a main draw match at Grand Slam. She's never played the main draw of the Australian Open. George, I spoke to a few people close to Raducanu earlier this week, and I think they just said, well, just don't draw Świątek. And she didn't draw Świątek, and I think this is a pretty darn good draw, isn't it?
Yeah, I think if you sometimes think when you see someone, they've never been past the first round of a slam, you think, how old are they? How long have they been on the tour? This is a 27-year-old singles player who's not yet got past the first round and not been to many first rounds in there. So, yeah, pretty perfect draw for Emma. Note of caution, obviously, about her fitness and where she's up to at the minute. Second round would be great in terms of putting a spotlight on the event. If we got Raducanu Goff, that would be a really, really nice match to build up to, but we'll see. We won't count our chickens knowing the women's game. I have
to say, I looked at the draw and said, yes, it's a great first round, but there's probably only two or three women that you don't want in the second round, and Coco Gauff is one of them, Świątek being the other one. So I think she could have done a bit better there in terms of draw, but I also think probably on form and fitness that second round is probably the median result for Raducanu at this Grand Slam anyway, so maybe playing it against Goff is good for the game. Calvin, do you think Emma, if she gets through against Goff, has any chance of an upset?
No, you'd have to make Goff favourite, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Goff's played some good tennis at the minute as well, and Emma isn't playing much tennis.
No, she's not. That's true. The other British girl in the draw is Harriet Dart, and I'm sorry for calling her a girl. I know there's a couple of listeners who think that we should be calling them women, and they are right in fairness. Harriet Dart is playing Jill Teichmann, the number 32 Swede from Switzerland. If she gets through it, I think she's in quite, she obviously steals her draw, but then could face Maria Sakkari in the third round if she gets that far. George, I was having a conversation about Harriet Dart the other day, and sort of in comparison to all the other British women, unfortunately none of whom made it through qualifying. Both Jodie Burrage and Lily Miyazaki got to the final round of qualifying, but both lost. Harriet Dart has squeezed the lemon. She's got obvious limitations. She's very small. She's got a poor serve, but she absolutely scraps, doesn't she?
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, she's done incredibly well. We said at the end of last year that she'd had a really good year in terms of high-profile victories compared to a lot of other British female players at the minute, and male players for that matter, actually. But she's done amazingly well, even to become a top 100 player with her limitations. So everything from here is a bonus. I'd be pretty shocked if she won this match. I think Teichmann's a pretty good professional. She's had some good wins under her belt the last couple of weeks, like Anisimova, Pavlyuchenkova, good, solid top 50, top as high as, top 20, top 10 players. So, yeah, Teichmann's going to be tougher to come through, and I don't think Dart will come through it. And, there have been a few matches at Grand Slams where she's looked very, very short in the past if her opponent plays well. But she's in decent enough form herself, giving a good account of herself on the tour most of the time now. So, yeah, we can see. But I don't think it's going to be a gloriously blissful Australian Open women's singles draw for the Brits, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Although I would caveat that with Harriet Dart is so much better as an underdog than a front runner. She at the US Open, you'll remember she beat Daria Kasatkina in the first round, which I don't think any of us predicted, and she then drew Delma Galfi in the second round, which looked like a really kind option because she'd pinched to the seeds draw, and she lost 4 in love, and she was. I spoke to her afterwards. She was in tears. She was absolutely gutted. And rightly so, and I think she loves being the underdog, but actually them being the favourite is so different.
I think this is just a symptom of the women's game at the minute, though. I mean, like when I'm looking through the men's draw for the Australian Open, thinking about fantasy and just preparing for today, you can see immediately in the men's draw where the gaps are, where the pockets of weak players who you'd be really, really surprised if they went through. You try and do that in the bloody women's game. You're like, oh my God, you got Muguruza sat there and seeded just as a random hole. Who knows where she's going to be at? There's so many players that you can't even begin to predict what that player is going to be like at this tournament. And that is 80% of the draw. The only players you kind of give some level of consistency to right now are Swiatek and Goff. And that's about it. Every other one, I'm like, God knows who's going to turn up to this tournament. So, yeah, I mean, from that perspective, Dart's always got a chance. But I do actually think Teichmann's quite a solid player who I don't see having too many drastically bad matches, which I think will kind of take her through in this one. But I've been wrong many times before, so we'll see.
You have. We've yet to see Harriet Dart in tour action, although she was obviously part of the United Cup team that did reasonably well for GB. And so there's some positives there, and I'm sure she'll take a lot from that run. I think I know what everyone's going to say, but I suppose we should do our, 2 first-round Brits predictions. I'll start and say that Emma Raducanu will beat Tamara Korpatsch. Calvin, do you share my optimism?
Yeah, I don't know much about Korpatsch, but I think that Emma will win, yeah.
George?
I'm tempted to take the retirement, to be honest. Is that really bad to say?
I mean, if that's what you think. But
it's like a fair...
I would caution you against
Emma wins
it.
if she's fit, but I think she might go out from a fitness perspective. So I'll take it from that side, even though I think she's comfortably the favourite.
So you're taking Korpatsch,
both are healthy.
And I assume, George, based on what you've just said, then you are predicting 0 British women in the second round.
I am, and I'm certainly predicting 0 British women in the third round if Raducanu does come through.
I think if we have 0 in the second round, it's pretty sure we'll have 0 in the third round. I think that's definitely a good prediction. Calvin, are you giving Dart any chance against Teichmann?
I think it's a close one. I'd say it's 60-40 in Teichmann's favour. But yeah, I think Teichmann will win.
That's the problem with tennis. There can only be one winner. Well, as I always say, every match is 50-50 because you either win or you lose. But apparently that's not how probability works. Right, after the break, we will run through the draw line by line. We'll look at something for Novak Djokovic and decide just how easy that draw is. Welcome back to Tennis Unfiltered, the Australian Open Draw edition with me, James Gray of iNews.co.uk and the iNewspaper. Calvin Betton, the tennis coach, and tennis writer George Belshaw are here with me. We are going to go through the women's draw first. After looking at the specific draws for the Brits, I thought we'd have our way through the women's draw. I'm going to caveat it by something that probably all of us will say or allude to at some point in this podcast, is the women's draw is mental and completely wide open, and almost all predictions will be wrong. That said, I think we can probably safely assume that Iga Świątek is going to make it through her quarter. She's got Hul Niemeyer in the first round, the big serving German. She might then face Camilla Sorio, who is a decent young player, but probably not enough to challenge her. Buskova or Andreescu in her third round, and then a potential quite interesting fourth round, either against Danielle Collins or Elena Rybakina, if they both make it that far. George, how does that look to you? A fairly straightforward quarter, or eighth, I should say, for the most consistent player in women's tennis?
I mean, Andreescu is one of those players who sits in my camp of, if she can get anywhere close to where she was before, she could be a serious threat to Świątek, but there's not been enough evidence to suggest that's going to happen. And Collins beat Świątek, didn't she, last year in the semis? And
She battered her 6-1. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that was a really odd match from Swiatek. Played very, very strangely, and really the occasion kind of got to it, which hasn't happened much since. Let's put it that way. But I would still favour this Swiatek against anyone in the draw as a whole, and certainly in this section. I mean, Rybakina has obviously shown she's capable of winning a Grand Slam, but not much since she actually won one. So I'm not convinced she'll be flying through either. But yeah, they're the names, aren't they? Andreescu, Rybakina, Collins, who are the threats in that section. But you'd still back Swiatek to kind of come through that.
I know it's not her favourite surface, but I also think like Buzkova, if she got going, then I think she's got a chance of maybe causing a little bit of a problem. But I don't know, just one that stuck out to me. She's in the same camp as Karolina Muchova, and not just because she's also Czech, but I don't know. Just names that jumped out to me. Calvin, the next section is Raducanu's and Goff's. The big draws in here are Badosa, Goff, Ostapenko, and Zheng Xinwen. I would suggest that there are 4 quite talented tennis players there, albeit Paula Badosa has inhabited the body of a less talented tennis player over the last 12 months. I mean, do you see any chance of Coco Gauff not coming out of that section?
Yeah, because purely sometimes she underperforms at the majors, but she's got a lot better at that.
Yeah.
I'd back her to come through it, but it's not unfeasible that she won't. I don't think there's any chance that Swiatek won't come through, but there is a chance that Gauff doesn't.
Siniakova's not the most straightforward first round either. I mean, she's not one of the world's greatest players, but she
well, I mean, she is literally the world's greatest doubles player.
Greatest doubles, yeah.
She is world number one in doubles. She's got the incredibly weird service action, hasn't she? She sort of lays the racket out really early on. I don't really know how to describe that, but she does this very, very early in the service action, and then I'm gesturing on video that obviously only George and Calvin can see. But when you see her,
we're loving it.
Also, I don't have any of the technical terminology to explain exactly what she does. But anyway, probably not a hugely straightforward first round, but I think you probably still think she'll be fine. I watched her practice with Jessica Pegula the other day, and it was very impressive. Like, she was hitting the ball extremely well. And she obviously just has won a title, but she's won a title in the right week, which is the week before the Slam. And she didn't even drop a set. I think she didn't even drop more than 4 games in a set in Auckland.
Yeah, we didn't actually talk about this last week, did we? Because we got a bit kind of bumped out away from the actual tennis last week. But I found it quite interesting. That was like only her 3rd title, and she's been winning one every 2 years in some ways. Like, I'm surprised from her perspective that when she kind of won that title quite early on in Linz, I think was her first title, it felt like she was going to be quite a relentless title winning machine and would really kind of build on that kind of winning mentality. That, even though there's been decent results elsewhere, it feels a little bit odd to me she's not kind of kept that habit going, if that makes sense. So I think that's something I'd like to see Gauff do more, is obviously win more titles, but even the lower level ones, I think there's something to be said for just actually blitzing your way through and really kind of picking up that momentum and building that kind of aura of invincibility, which she still is some way off getting compared to, say, a Swiatek, who can rattle off 37 wins in a row and pick up 5 titles in the process.
I know what you mean. It's a bit like when you read, like, I don't know, David Goffin's title count, and you're a bit like, oh, like, sure, how has he not won more? And she's obviously not been around for as long, but it's the same kind of slightly surprising number for someone that we think is pretty good. Right, let's move on to section 3 of the draw, which is where we find the number 3 seed and the world number 3, Jessica Pegula. She's got Christian in the first round, Jacqueline Christian, the Romanian, could face Brenda Fruhvirtova in the second round, who made it through qualifying, who's only 15. She's one of the very highly rated Czech sisters. She's yet another Czech teenager with a big future in the women's game, which is basically the whole WTA these days. The others in this section are Amanda Anisimova, Barbara Krejcikova, Petra Kvitova, yet more Czechs, as you notice.
There's 4 Czechs in this section.
Yeah,
which is pretty crazy.
Absolutely relentless. Check it out. Thank you very much. George, Jessica Pegula is... I mean, I wouldn't call her a dark horse because she's literally the number 3 seed, but I've been thinking that she's someone who really could win this tournament.
Yeah, you may remember I felt she was going to beat Swiatek at last year's US Open when they were kind of due to meet. I actually kind of fancied her as one of the few players who could beat Swiatek, and I was sort of proven right 5 months later when she thrashed her at the United Cup. Yeah, look, I think she's...
that doesn't prove you right at all.
Doesn't count.
No. I predicted something would happen, and then in a totally different context, it happened, but 5 months later. That's not a win.
Well, I think the broader point was that I think Pegula's one of the few players I'd look at in a Swiatek match at the minute and be like, I'm not 100% sure, or 99% sure Swiatek's going to win that at the moment.
All right.
I think she's playing some good stuff. So, yeah, I like the draw, really. I think Krejcikova's the only one in there I'd be looking at and thinking if she's close to what she was before, there'll be a problem. I've not seen Kvitova near her best level for a long time. Unless this 15-year-old Czech sensation is absolutely ludicrously good right now, this second, which I'm sure she is good, but there's Pegula level of good versus good to kind of make waves on the tour good. I think Pegula will come through this one fairly unscathed. Although Anisimova, you never know as well, just as a final name.
Yeah, I've seen a little bit of Amanda Anisimova in the last couple of weeks, and I know Calvin always says she doesn't live the life, but she's played quite well. I mean, there's a couple of decent results in there. She beat Teichmann. She lost to Teichmann in qualifiers in Adelaide, but then beat Samsonova, which I think is not a bad result. She's someone who people rate quite highly. There's been a bit in there. Calvin, you've definitely got something to say about Amanda Anisimova.
I saw she posted something on social media yesterday or the day before that suggested she's injured again. She said something like, when you're putting your body through it and it's just not happening or something.
That's interesting news.
Can't remember that it was Twitter or... Must have been Twitter, I think.
Well, that might be a little tip for fantasy tennis fans. # unfiltered fantasy tennis. So maybe she... interesting. Yeah, we'll see. Okay, let's move on because we're not making enough progress through this draw. Not quick enough progress for my liking. Into section 4, which I'm going to make our one-word section, completely arbitrarily. The seeds here are Madison Keys, Azarenka, Teichmann, Sakkari. Of those 4 seeds, George, you can start. Who is coming through?
Tough. Is that my one word?
Fine. Yeah, I mean, it's a classic Belshaw prediction.
I am going to stick with Sakkari, I think, but Keys and Azarenka are also tempting me.
Great,
and Teichmann, to be fair.
So what you've done there is picked all 4 of them. Unbelievable. Calvin, can you maybe stick to the brief any better than George?
No, give me the names again.
Sakkari, Keys, Azarenka, Teichmann.
I think Sakkari will come through that.
The other name you've left out there, James, who's not seeded, but I might change my view to is Tom Lanovich.
I mean, that is literally what I was going to say. So thanks.
Oh, sorry, James.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah, she is unseeded. She's playing Nadia Podoroska in the first round. She's only just unseeded, by the way. If it was last week, she would have been seeded. But she missed out by 2 places, which is pretty brutal. But she is going to play the winner of Azarenka Kenin, which, I mean, look,
Azarenka then.
Yeah, well, I know it's a shame, isn't it? But that's 2 Australian Open champions playing each other in the first round.
The only 2 in the draw, apparently.
Crikey, I suppose they are.
I saw that earlier on.
And also, you say Sophia Kenin's going to lose, but she's in Hobart at the moment. She's won 3 matches in a row. I can't really remember the last time Sophia Kenin won 3 tour matches in a row. I think it is probably a very long time. She beat Zhu, Zanevska, and Kalinina is a decent win in 3 sets. So she's playing Cocciaretto today. So, I mean, she might curse herself by winning the tournament. But, it just suggests that there's something brewing there. I think that's probably, well, I hope it's a first-round match to watch because I think it'll be quite intriguing. Right, into the bottom half, the 5th section. We've got 2 top 10 seeds in here. Kudermetova and Kasatkina. We've also got Karolina Pliskova, Zhang Shui, Petra Martic is in there as well for Petra Martic fans. The ever-watchable Yulia Putintseva, who's playing Sorana Castella, which I think would be quite a fun first-round match. But I think overall we probably expect Daria Kasatkina, who had a pretty good year last year, barring 1 or 2 surprises such as losing to Harriet Dart at the US Open. I think probably expect her to come out of it. George, you're wincing.
I am wincing. I think this is a really weird section. So weird that I'm almost backing Karolina Pliskova to come through.
Well,
I think Pliskova can sometimes, when you least expect her to do well, is when she actually does do quite well. And I quite fancy this draw. I think it's a pretty weak section. It's somewhere I'll be considering for my fantasy bet, but I'm not sure who will take advantage. But I wouldn't place much money on relying on Kasatkina, and I certainly wouldn't on Kudermetova. I think this is a pretty weak seed section, to be honest. So I think Pliskova's got as much chance as anyone to kind of actually do well here. But I wouldn't be surprised if this was like qualifier city, to be honest.
Well, yeah. Katie Volynets, who has Katie Volynets could only ever be a tennis player because her name is Volley Nets. And she's got Yevgenia Rodina, who has played 1 Grand Slam in the last 4 years because she obviously took 3 years out of the game. So, anyway, we'll move down to section 6 where we've got Annette Kontaveit, Ekaterina Alexandrova, Irina Camelia Begu, and the much easier to say Caroline Garcia. Caroline Garcia, I think, maybe won the WTA award for most improved last year or something similar. I mean, do you think she's the kind of player? Do you think? I'll put this another way. Is she just someone who's got quite a high ceiling but isn't necessarily going to produce it all the time? Or is she actually someone who is now going to be an established top 10 player, do you think?
No, I think it's the former of those 2 options. I'd say that all the players who we're listing now, once you've got Pashvontek and maybe Goff and 1 or 2 others, they're all into that. This is why predicting the women's draw is so difficult. Because historically, anybody can beat anybody. It just never goes to plan with seeds. It just never does.
George, do you feel the same way about Caroline Garcia, or have you got more confidence in her longevity in the top 10?
I mean, purely in terms of this tournament, I think the second round's tricky, like Fernandez or Cornet. I mean, I wouldn't.
Yeah, Cornet's an absolute nightmare draw. Yeah.
I wouldn't bank on Garcia beating either of them earlier in a slam, and that's nothing against Garcia. I just think those 2 dangerous floaters sitting around there. I mean, this is another section of the draw that it feels like Garcia is probably head and shoulders above the rest in some perspectives, but I wouldn't take anyone with great confidence here. Nice to see Taylor Townsend kicking around again. She's always fun to watch if you get a chance to have a go at her and Diane Parry first round double wildcard match. Nice to see Townsend have a run. Yeah,
and why is Diane Parry so good to watch, George? Single-handed backhand.
Single-handed backhand, yeah. And so serve, volley, single-handed backhand, 2 things that don't happen enough in the women's game.
Yeah, that is going to be
head-to-head.
Absolute throwback match. I mean, it'll be on some random court that I don't know where it is, but I will definitely try and get there. Right, we're almost at the end of the women's draw. Arina Sabalenka, Elise Mertens drawn Garbina Muguruza, which is absolutely horrendous. Martina Trevisan and Belinda Bencic are the seeds here. A few other interesting names here. Camilla Giorgi is in this section. I saw her walking freely through the Australian Open grounds the other day. I was walking behind her. And I noted that there was no police escort or border force officials. You may be aware what I'm alluding to here is that Camilla Giorgi is currently under investigation by the Italian police for obtaining a false COVID pass, which would suggest that she has potentially deceived her way into Australia last year. She denies all the allegations and it is still under investigation, but it's a heck of a story that is gathering pace. Anyway, that's not tennis related. Calvin, usually this time of year I say, it's about time Arina Sabalenka won a slam, isn't it?
Yeah, I think she'll come through that section. She's in decent form. Seems to have settled a bit more. Her serve seems to have settled down, which was a nightmare about a year ago. But yeah, I think she comes through that.
She got to the final of Adelaide 1, incidentally, where she lost to Linda Noskova, who sound the talented Czech teenager klaxon, because Linda Noskova had an incredible... So because of the way the rankings work and because your entry ranking is taken 6 weeks before the tournament, she is ranked 56 in the world, and she had to come through qualifying, and she lost in qualifying. What are you doing, George?
I think Sabalenka won, didn't she?
Yeah, Sabalenka did win. What did I say?
So she lost.
I thought you said she lost.
All right, well, I mean, you know what I meant. Everyone else knew. Come on, move on. Anyway, what I wanted to say was Linda Noskova had an incredible week where she beat Potapova, Kasatkina, Claire Liu, Azarenka and Ons Jabeur on the way to the final. She's an unbelievable player, and she turned up to have to play qualifying in the Australian Open, and she was absolutely knackered, and she lost to actually Catherine Seabov, the Canadian, who did actually end up qualifying for the main draw. So it's a real shame not to see Linda Noskova, who people may remember played Emma Raducanu at the French Open last year as well. But anyway, I'm getting distracted because Arina Sabalenka won the title in Adelaide, and as you say, Calvin, is in good form. George, do you have any names in that bit of the draw that make you think, no, Arina Sabalenka won't make it? I would argue that one name that does mean that is Arina Sabalenka, but
I am actually inclined to agree with Calvin on that. I mean, as I've said before, Muguruza, you never know who's going to turn up, but typically recently it's not been a good version of Muguruza, which probably means she'll now go and reach the final. Bencic does have a habit of just pulling a quarter-final out of a draw when you're not necessarily backing her, so always dangerous, and Pavlyuchenkova can occasionally mix it as well. But yeah, I think Sabalenka's playing well and got a good enough draw there to come through. Right,
into the bottom section, where obviously we find the world number 2 and number 2 seed Ons Jabeur, who I mentioned there after losing to Linda Noskova. I went and watched Ons Jabeur practice at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Wednesday, and it was about 33 degrees, and I stood there for 3 minutes, and then I said, nope, this is entirely too much, and she was grinding away for an hour. I actually think it should be illegal to make tennis players play in this heat. It's completely ridiculous. Anyway, she's got Tamara Zidansek in the first round, which is quite an interesting little tester early on. In that section, we've also got Kaya Kanepi, Lyudmila Samsonova, and Beatrice Haddad-Maia, as well as the other Fruhvirtova, Linda Fruhvirtova, who is the older Fruhvirtova. She's 17, Brenda is 15. George, Kaya Kanepi, the constant tricky first round. She's playing an Australian wildcard called Kimberly Birrell, who I don't claim to know anything about, but she could be Ons Jabeur's third round opponent, which is quite intriguing.
Yeah, I think this is a good draw though for Jabeur as a whole. I like this section.
I have to disagree. I have to disagree. Because
I think Zidansek's tough, but I think the rest of it, I'd back Jabeur as she grows in.
But because of the way the draw is set, the best seed that the number 2 seed can face in the third round, I think, is 25, because they rigged the draw. And Kaya Kanepi, I think, is the strongest player in that section of seeds, the hardest player to play, compared to Buzkova, Mertens, Begu, Anisimova, Zheng, Kanepi, Pliskova, Teichmann. I think Kanepi's quite bad. And then Beatrice Haddad-Maia is one of the scrappiest and most improved players on the WTA in the last 12 months.
Never done it at a slam though. She's never been past second round of a slam, Haddad-Maia. So, she's one of those that comes in the category of doing well outside the slams, but can't handle it there at the minute. Right. Yeah, I think there's a lot of players in there who, even Kanepi's been known as absolute giant killer over the years. Sometimes when she's heavy favourite in an early match, doesn't quite go so well. Her record against top 10 at slam is as good as it is outside that. So, yeah, I think if it was Kanepi was 33rd in the draw and was playing Jabeur first round, I'd say that's a horror show. But I think Fruhvirtova might come through that little section, which I'm not saying is easy, but I'd give her a decent shot coming through there. And then there's people like Stevens, Vekic in there who've had their day but don't seem anywhere close to it. I don't know. I don't feel any of the seeds are that strong, and the rest of them, like Vondrousova as well. I mean, you never know what you're going to get, but probably not much. So yeah, I think Zidansek's arguably the hardest one in there for Jabeur, who could catch her cold.
there's a qualifier in there that I know a couple of very knowledgeable people on Twitter are quite excited about, which is Oksana Selekmetova, who is 19. She's from Russia. She won 2 Grand Slam doubles junior titles on different surfaces, and also got to the final of the Wimbledon doubles juniors. She's had a decent record in singles juniors as well. I think she's ranked 180 odd in the world, but she's pretty much only in her first full WTA season because she was set back a little bit by the pandemic, and obviously being Russian made life a bit difficult for a while as well. So just keep an eye on her, that's all I'm saying. Right, shall we move on to the men's draw, because time is against us, as it always is, like an ever-rolling tide. I think we'll start at the bottom, because I don't want to talk about Rafa Nadal straight out of the blocks, as we've already talked about him a little bit. Casper Ruud, number 2 seed, he could incidentally be world number 1. There are 4 different people who could be world number 1 by the end of this tournament. Tsitsipas, Djokovic... No, so Tsitsipas, Nadal, Alcaraz, and Casper Ruud, incidentally. But they basically, all of them except Alcaraz need to win it, essentially. Casper Ruud, Alejandro
So
Davidovich...
Djokovic can't go past him?
I don't think so. I could be wrong, but I'm fairly sure that he can't. Anyway. Casper Ruud, Davidovich Fokina, Bautista Agut, and Berrettini, who obviously, as discussed, has... Murray in the first round. There's also a cracking match here, which is Thanasi Kokkinakis against Fabio Fognini, which will probably be on a quite rowdy, reasonably sized, but outside court, and I think might get a decent crowd in. It might be on Labour. Who knows? I could be wrong, but I'd be surprised.
Probably the third one. What's the third one called? Hisense?
1573 or Kia?
Oh yeah, that used to be Hisense and has changed to that 1573. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
that's not a good court for the Aussies.
George, Casper Ruud, someone we've come to think of as very consistent, and for when people see the Netflix documentary, someone I've come to think of as quite angry. Is there any demons in here for him?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd back him comfortably to get to the 4th round, I would say. But yeah, I mean, this is a funny section, isn't it? Really, I mean, there's the odd little liar, like even kind of Jan-Lennard Struff coming in as a qualifier. You don't really want to play him in the first 3 rounds of a slam. He plays Tommy Paul first one. That's a bit of a banana skin for Paul. Davidovich, Fokina, Bublik. These are random people. You never quite know what you're going to get.
Davidovich Fokina against Bublik, by the way, that is going to be another absolute firecracker. 2 complete lunatics.
Yeah, it'll be a good one. I kind of just feel everyone in this draw, apart from Ruud, is lacking that little bit of consistency at the moment that makes me kind of fancy him a bit more. But there are players in there who, if they have their perfect day, can definitely beat Casper Ruud, but he seems to have become solid enough that I'm going to elevate him to feeling fairly confident about him reaching the quarterfinals.
And if he reaches the quarterfinals, he will play the best player coming out of Section 7, which involves Taylor Fritz, Miomir Kekmanovic, Diego Schwartzman, Alexander Zverev. They are the seeded players. You've also got David Goffin in there. The GOAT is there as well, Tseng. Nicolas Basilashvili, the WOAT. Calvin, Taylor Fritz is someone that people, in fact, people, I've been me, have been suggesting is going to put a deep run together at a slam. Is this the one?
I mean, it's a nice draw he's got there. It's probably the nicest section for a seed. I don't, when your other seed's Zverev's Zverev, I'd be surprised if he wins a match.
He's got the lucky loser. Yeah, Varius. But I feel like Varius has recently done something quite significant in the first round of a slam, and I realise that's quite weird, but I can't. Here we go. Yeah, he went 5 sets with Felix at the French last year, and was 2 sets up actually. I mean, that felt much more like Felix than Varius, but
that was definitely more Felix. I remember that.
Yeah. All right, so we think Taylor Fritz versus Casper Ruud in the quarterfinals. I mean, that would be a tasty match as well, like against 2 real. I mean, I'm going to say up-and-comers. Casper is number 2 in the world and been to a slam final, but you know what I mean. He doesn't want a slam yet. Right, yeah, section... Sorry,
I don't think Casper Ruud makes the quarterfinals.
I mean, who do you think beats him? Fokina?
No, you said
Berrettini?
Berrettini, was it? Berrettini,
Yeah.
yeah. Berrettini or Murray, whoever wins that match will beat him. Rude's record against like top 10 players is terrible. And I think
swear.
he's definitely overranked at number 2 in the world.
All right,
I feel
let's.
like I watched Rude put Murray to the sword not long ago. Maybe on. No, he did, yeah, in San Diego 2 years ago. But yeah, I think on this section, they're going back to this. If Zverev had played more than, well, if he'd even played a match since the French Open last year, I'd back him to come through this section. I think it's a really weak section.
He has played a couple of matches,
pick.
hasn't he? Has he not played like? He didn't play United Cup, did he?
I don't think so.
I thought he played. Yeah, he did play United Cup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I stuck with the United Cup.
Yeah, he lost twice. Anyway, let's move on to Novak Djokovic, shall we? Because we've gone on long enough without talking about him. He's got Roberto Caballas Baena in the first round, who none of us expect him to lose to. He's then either got Hugo Dellien or is that Enzo Kukau? I'm fairly sure it is. Yes. Grigor Dimitrov is his third round slate. And then either Duminor or Carreño Busta. Calvin, this looks like a very kind draw for the 9-time champion who does not need a kind draw.
Yeah, no way he's not coming through that. Absolutely zero chance he's not coming
Assuming
through.
he's fit.
I think even if he's not.
It's really hard to see Djokovic losing a match in this entire bottom half, isn't it, really? I mean, I'd be absolutely stunned if Djokovic isn't a finalist at this tournament.
You heard it here first. If he is to face a tricky match in the quarterfinals, it would be against one of Holger Rune, Nick Kyrgios, Dan Evans, Andrei Rublev. I mean, Holger Rune's been playing very well, George, and has beaten Djokovic recently.
Yeah, not over 5 though. Just no way.
Okay. Who's coming through that section then? I mean, there are some very.
Love Kyrgios too, obviously.
I think there's some very tasty matches in this section. I mean, Dominic Thiem against Andrei Rublev in the first round. That's a shocker of a draw for Thiem, isn't it? Thiem fan George.
Sad times. But you never know. Rublev can throw it around. Thiem was growing end of last year, so we'll see. But yeah, I mean, look, could have Kyrgios Rune round 3. That'd be pretty good. And I swear we get Kyrgios Humbert pretty early at so many slams. That's always a really good match. That's second round potentially if he can come through.
That's the problem. I know it's only Richard Gasquet, but Hugo Humbert, his form is atrocious. I think he ended last season with some horrific run, and then he has played 2 matches so far this year and lost them both. For a guy who I seem to think about a year ago we talked about him quite a lot because he's an interesting player and he's a little bit different, but he had an absolutely awful 2022. So I think we might get Kyrgios Gasquet, which I'm not particularly interested in watching, to be honest. But Kyrgios Rune in the third round would be an absolute perler.
Yeah, with the winner facing Rublev or who knows, Dan Evans. You never know.
I just can't.
Or Thiem. You never know.
I can't see Evo beating Andrei Rublev. Calvin?
I can, yeah.
Really?
He's beaten him before. Yeah, he's beaten him before. It's not a terrible matchup.
Right.
He definitely fancies that he can beat him. I think he might beat him twice before.
Yeah, I think you've got a point there, actually. I think he might have a decent head-to-head record against Rublev. So, all right, well, maybe I'm pessimistic. It's 3-3, incidentally, their head-to-head.
Yeah, of the top 8 seeds, probably Rublev's as good a matchup as Evans would hope for, I'd say, to be honest.
Yeah, quite possibly. All right, into the top half of the men's draw. The bottom of the top features Felix Auger-Aliassime. He's got his countryman Vasek Pospisil in the first round. Francisco Cerundolo is there. Borna Coric, Cam Norrie as well, as I mentioned. Interesting unseeded players in here. I'm not sure there's too much. Wu Yibing is the Chinese player who's got a wild card. He's playing Mute in the first round. George, Felix or Norrie feels like the one. I mean, quite an interesting match for Norrie, that, if he gets Felix in the fourth round.
Yeah, I think this is a good draw for both of them. The player maybe who might be a problem for Norrie prior to that is Coric. I mean, he had a few very big wins last year, and he's a very capable player when fit. So I think that'd be a good standard of a third round match if we got that. Yeah, I mean the rest of the draw I don't really fancy at all. Pospisil has had some decent first round results over the years, so that's not an easy first round draw for Felix in years gone by. But Felix seems to kind of have turned a bit of a corner, doesn't he? So I think he'll really fancy his chances of going to the quarters, and it probably very good for the game if Felix can have a good tournament here and really have a good year as a whole.
Yes, one of the big stars of the Netflix documentary as well. Calvin, if we get Norrie versus Felix, where's your money?
That would be on Felix. I think he's due a big one at one of the slams. This could be it. Especially, are we in the top half?
Yeah, there's bottom of the top.
Yeah, I could see anyone can come through that top half. And he could be as much as anybody.
Yeah. If we move up to section 3, it's Stefanos Tsitsipas's section. He's got Quentin Alice in the first round. His seeds are Botic van der Zandschulp, who, incidentally, the guy doing the draw yesterday absolutely butchered. He did the thing that you do when you know you've got a difficult name to say, you take quite a big breath. So he went, Botic van der Zandschulp. Completely butchered it. The only other person that everyone does that with is the former Iranian president, which is Ahmadinejad. And you have to do a breath before, otherwise you just can't get through it. And Lorenzo Musetti is in there, and Yannick Sinner as well. As I mentioned, Sinner's got Edmund in the first round. Would anyone like to pick who's coming out of this section? Because I am struggling.
Sinner, I think.
Yeah, I think Sinner.
I hate the phrase "he's due one," but he absolutely is. Like, did he get to the quarterfinal of every slam last year, or maybe just 3 out of 4? I don't think he made the quarterfinal of the French. No, he got 4th round of the French. You just feel like he's ready now.
And he had a lot of close matches in some of them.
I just don't trust Tsitsipas in these. It might be Tsitsipas that comes through. You know, he's probably overall he's the best player, but you just can't trust him in these sort of tournaments.
Sinner's had match
quite
points.
Hard to see.
Sinner's had match points in some quite big matches. Like, he had match points against Alcaraz. He had match points against Djokovic at the French as well. Like, I'm just worried about that pattern, George.
Yeah, but in this section, I don't really see too many. I still would struggle to see him beating a Djokovic or even a Medvedev right now, probably in a really big match. But as Calvin says, yeah, Tsitsipas just doesn't seem kind of quite there at the minute. That said, I find it hard to think Tsitsipas is going to lose to anyone before that 4th round. I mean, couldn't have got a better draw than Hallis, Hanfman, Hijikata, Greek Sport, Kotov, Ivashka, and Van der Zandschulp. That is really about as good as it gets in terms of a first 3 rounds of a slam. I'd be interested to see how Musetti goes. He's kind of caught me a bit surprised him being this high seeded, to be honest, 17. Like, he's someone we've liked for a long time, but I hadn't quite clocked the progress he'd made up the rankings to be taking such a high seeding.
The only concern is he's not fit. He retired during the United Cup final. I mean, it was said to be a precaution, and he was already a set down, and 2 weeks before a slam. But he's got a shoulder problem, which I think may be an issue. Anyway, I would be slightly concerned about that for that reason. George, time is against us, so I'm cutting you off.
Sorry.
I'm sure it wasn't worth listening to anyway. Section 2 is tasty. Daniil Medvedev, Seb Korda, Denis Shapovalov, and Hubert Hurkacz. Calvin, that list of names all being in one section of 16 players, you've got to think that's going to throw up some real matchups.
Yeah, you went through them pretty quick there. Can I have them again? First ones?
Hurkacz, Shapovalov, Korda, and Medvedev.
Yeah, everyone a bit up and down on form there. I think you'd have to favour Medvedev, I think. Yeah,
it's interesting, isn't it? We've sort of hung Medvedev out to dry a couple of times on the pod, and quite rightly in some ways. But George, you've got your lip stuck out like you think he's not going to do it.
No, I think I'm picking him to reach the final, and with consummate ease. Actually, I I'm not actually that troubled by any of those in his draw. To be perfectly honest, I genuinely think the draw looks okay for Medvedev on the whole. Nadal's kind of nowhere near where we think he should be, so that's a pretty good guy to have kind of in your semi-final lineup. I'm not sure I'll see him beating Djokovic, but hard court slams, Medvedev's pretty consistent and has been over the last 4 years. The guy he lost to last year was Kyrgios. That was Kyrgios in a very good moment. Still a very tight match. Obviously blew it against Nadal, but if you track his hard court slam record over the last couple of years, it's pretty good. So I'm picking him to reach the final.
We're short on time, but I'm just going to throw some breaking news in there. Gerard Piqué's pulled out of the Davis Cup, which doesn't sound like a set of words I would ever say, but the ITF have announced that the Cosmos partnership to run the Davis Cup, which is what kind of birthed the Davis Cup finals, is going to end after 2023. So God knows what the Davis Cup will look like next year. Much to talk about, I think. It'll be good to chat. Right, finally, top of the draw, Rafa Nadal, who we've discussed a little bit. He's also got Yoshihito Nishioka, who has seeded a slam, which I can't quite believe. Karen Hatchoff and Francis Tiafoe. I'm going to put this out there. Francis Tiafoe's section to lose.
Yeah, he's got a good chance. I still would put caution against betting against Nadal on the basis it's not the world's strongest draw. I think Draper's a really tough first round for him, but the rest of that he'll be fairly happy with. And if there's one thing we know about Nadal, if you dare let him grow in past the third, fourth round, he'll fancy his chances of going the whole way. So yeah, I'd still lean towards him at the moment, to be honest.
Calvin, do you feel the same way?
I'd favour Tiafoe, like you said. I think Tiafoe will come through
that. Which would give us
beating Draper, I think.
It would give us a really nice set of quarterfinals if things go as we expect. Tiafoe versus Medvedev, Sinner versus Felix, Rublev or Rune, we're not quite sure who's coming out of that, against Djokovic, Fritz against either Berrettini or Ruud. I mean, that would be a blockbuster set of quarterfinals. So a really intriguing draw. We have run out of time because it's incredibly busy, and that's the Australian Open for you. But please do leave us a rating and review. Tell your friends that the name has changed. I know some people who listen on Spotify have been having some problems with the name change, so I apologise if you've lost us. Make sure you unlike and re-like the podcast. That's sort of my best piece of advice. But most importantly, one way or another, make sure you come back next week.
Sports Social Podcast Network.